Well, welcome everyone to the Darien TV79 meeting for the second quarter of 2025. We have a quorum. Do I get here an approval for the minutes?
So moved.
Second by Al. Meetings are approved. Jim, programming.
We've had several innovations in terms of new programs, which have done very well. One, quite surprisingly, is this obituary feature I'm running every week called In Memoriam. Runs about 2 minutes long, and basically we just take the pictures from funeral home and death announcements and put a name and a date in there as well too. But Mike had I think it was your barber said he was touched to find that his wife was listed in the program.
Yeah.
A couple other people have also mentioned it to me.
Yeah, that's how I found out she passed away.
Yeah. So it was just a smart idea on my part. Like, what do people read newspapers for anymore? The obituaries. So you're of a certain age when you start reading the obituaries every day as the first thing in the paper. And as somebody said once, if my name's not there, I can continue the day. So that's going well. The Gorham's Pond video that our first selectman made explaining all that's had 225 views. The walking tour of the Hindley, Holmes, and Royle schools last week has had 300 views. Viewership is strong. John also suggested, and I did an interview with the young man, high school graduate from DHS, who is designing concepts for a new town flag. And very bright kid, good interview. We showed the flags. He talked about his design concepts. And that's going to come up to a vote by the Board of Selectmen and maybe a presentation in front of the RTM as well too. So we own that. Best interview I did all week was with David Genovese, talking about what's going on with the Corbin District and what is that giant cement monolith on the post road. Got some great video from that. We shot some B-roll moving through the area. It's airing tonight for the first time. We have a new DHS intern who will be joining us shortly. Her name is Olivia Sapper. Second year in a row, we've had a DHS intern who is particularly interested, not in video, but in, she's going to be a government major. She's going to Dartmouth. So her advisor said, you want to find out what government's like? Get involved with TV79. So the deal I make with her is you go through the training process, learn how to push the buttons and, shoot meetings, and I'll set you up with whoever you want to talk to in town government and give you a very intimate view of the operation of town government. Waiting to get a few more questions for the next round of Ask the First Selectman. This is all in addition to the regular meeting coverage that we have. Next week, we got 12 meetings in 1 week, which is why when we get to talking about technology, there's some, hopefully some encouraging news there because we're well staffed, but come the fall, we're going to have a turnover again, as we usually do with kids graduating from Norwalk Community College and moving on to better and greater things, one hopes as well too. I think that's all I can think of. Well, yeah, I have to give credit to Mike. The RTM invited us at Mike's suggestion to make a presentation to the full RTM on what TV79 is, how to watch it, and how to use the technology to get the most out of watching it. Mike put together a deck. I got up in front of the crowd, showed his PowerPoint deck, and dazzled them. I think they held, they were paying close attention, and people came up and asked for free TV79 magnets afterwards as well too.
Who it was and who Edward R. Murrow was.
Yeah, that's right. But it was a good show as well too for 79 because it answered a lot of questions about how to use the website, how to follow us on YouTube, how to run meetings on YouTube at a faster speed if you don't want to watch some of these meetings. Some of the meetings, like last night, there was a ZBA meeting that ran 3 hours and 15 minutes. EPC last week, I think, ran 4 hours nonstop. Well, I mean, I think they took a 5-minute break somewhere in the middle of that. But some of these meetings are getting super long. I've been having a little trouble with the Darien Housing Authority, which holds offsite meetings. And twice in the past year, the chairman forgot there was a meeting, didn't show up. It's really hard to get an agenda. So what I've just basically told him is, if you're going to cancel meetings like that at the last moment, we'll just take your Zoom. So yeah, they do a Zoom component of their meeting. So last week's meeting, I told them, yeah, we'll take the Zoom. We don't have staff to go up there in person, spend a lot of money for a meeting that may or may not happen. But send us the Zoom. Record the Zoom to the cloud. Of course not. No, they recorded it to a PC and couldn't figure out how to send me the file. So this is the story of my life as program director, chasing down agendas, trying to find out if meetings that are on the town web calendar are really going to happen. But I guess I like it. So happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I read in the newsletter that Fred Conti is been added to the Darien Housing Authority. So I don't know
Yes.
if he's or he has a long history of maybe go back probably to the beginning days of TV79.
When he was on P&Z, he was chairman of P&Z. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was Board of Finance. It was P&Z.
I think it was P&Z. Yeah, he's a planning guy too. Yeah, you can figure out who it is that appoints people to that particular body and figure out what might be going on with appointments like that, but we digress. So
Newsletter where it kind of came out of our first quarter meeting, sort of. We've been talking about it. Carrie came up with the idea of best of, and it went off from there. It's nice to see that the open rate for both the program guide and the Darien TV79, best of Darien TV79, is hovering between 65 and 69%. And it's gone up slightly, not a lot, but it started at 60% and hit 69% last week. And it's catching up with the program guide. I told Jim before we started, and Carrie and I talked about, we've learned a lot about ChatGPT and how the more you ask it, the better the results are going to be. And it's just realizing I can ask any question and they're going to figure out what I'm talking about, which is amazing. We'll see. Anybody else have any thoughts on the newsletter?
you're getting great email fan mail from people. And I know you look at who has opened the newsletter, and I think you said something like it reads like a who's who of Darien. So yeah, the people that really follow town government are finding that newsletter immensely helpful, and I give total credit to you, Mike, and to Carrie for all the work you've been putting into it. I think initially you said if it took like 2 hours a week of your time, you'd be able to do it. I mean, how many hours is it taking, really?
Less each week because we learn how to use ChatGPT better.
Yep.
And it corrects a lot of the mistakes, like the thinking of timestamps, and creating 2 different versions, one for the description that goes in the more section under the video, and then ChatGPT can edit it down to what they recommend going into the newsletter as a more quick. The design of the newsletter is, and I couldn't think of any hook last week of what do you know about the POCD, so I went with the 3 minutes to find out what's going on in Darien, and ChatGPT says, or Mailchimp said that it took 3 minutes and 29 seconds to read the newsletter last week. So that's a good barometer. If someone says, oh yeah, in 3 minutes, I can get a pretty good idea of the the most response I've got is I put in the line that Hanson Road might open early. And two or three people that are impacted by that bridge closing to say, oh, I didn't know it might open early. So we'll say Carrie and I are gonna soldier on and see what it's like over the summer to see what the time is. But it should be fairly quiet over the summer. But the OPC still meets and the Board of Selectmen still meet and Planning and Zoning still meets. So, you know, there are committees that, you know, are still meeting. One of the things we talked about at the last meeting was, Al, you're looking at best practices, and Dennis, you're looking at AI and ChatGPT as a tool, and, you know, as of being from 30,000 feet, you know, what do you see? And, you know, are there both in what others might be doing around the country and also in terms of local journalism? You know, we're fortunate that Darien is not a local news desert as long as TV79 exists. But then from a ChatGPT, Dennis, what's your work been like in terms of what have you learned that surprised you in the last 3 months? So Al, why don't I start with you?
I don't really have much to say on that issue, but I actually was doing more of the those websites you gave me about the Hayward website and that kind of
Right.
thing. And so I didn't really get into best practices. One of the things I thought was interesting was
So unless you saw something on those sites that they're doing to say, yeah, we can steal that idea.
Well, I did in terms of was it Nano Media?
Yeah.
They provide platforms for free. Did you are you aware of that?
No.
Yeah.
We have a proposal from a guy that we're looking for funding for that will help streamline the work process. I've learned from 3 months ago when I got his proposal, how much I've learned in the last 3 months that I see what was in his proposal. But I thought, wow, he can do that. And then I found out we can do that if you play around with ChatGPT long enough. Yeah, I'd like to figure out a way to have a newspaper type, you know, or a digital text version. You know, one of the things that Carrie and I've noticed is a lot of people access the newsletter. A 68% open rate is spectacular.
Yes.
Not as many people click on the video as I thought. But the idea is being skim it. If there's something specific, hopefully we've targeted that subject. But if I want to see the whole meeting, it's there. I'd like to figure out a way to, and there is a way to add a button to say, I want to read what's in the description above the, you know, when you go to the more and you open it up and there's a description that we do, that's the longer version of I'd like to make a easier text version of making that easier to somebody who says, I'm going to click the read button and read what's in the description as opposed to just the headline or digging deep into the video. As whether they like to get their information that way or it's a better use of their time.
How many characters are you allowed in the description box in YouTube?
5,000.
That's in Vimeo. Is it the same on YouTube?
Same as YouTube, and that's again ChatGPT. Now I can say, don't give me more than 5,000 characters for the 3.5 hour GIAC meetings. You know, they would give me 8,000 characters. Just say, all right, cut it down to 5,000 characters. In which, again, we were doing the editing down from 8,000 to begin with, not knowing that ChatGPT could do it for you. So, and that's talking about time saver. You know, that was.
How is that? How is that judgment?
It's. What'd you say, Carrie? 95%?
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, I was hesitant, so I watch it carefully, you know.
Well, I was intrigued by our last meeting that it gets lazy as the meeting goes on. So is that still the case?
Yeah, but again, we were before when we started having to, because you can only do an hour and a half at a time. So we'd have to split the meetings into two and run at two different times and merge them. Well, ChatGPT says, oh, no, you don't have to do that. Here, just load them in this file and tell me what the problem is, and I'll take care of it for you. That saved an hour on a 3.5 hour meeting, you know, because you had to do it once in 5 minutes rather than doing it manually for an hour. So it's a formula that Carrie and I were talking about. You know, we can't do anything about democracy on the national level, but we can make sure that in the town of Darien, no one wonders about what's going on and the credibility of the information. And hopefully the things we can learn, other towns can, might want to adapt, who have news deserts, but have the same amount of video available for their local town government that they could do something similar.
And Mike's going on the road.
Oh.
He's taking it on the road.
Yeah, take it on the road.
Well, that's why, Al, I hope you had a chance to take a look at the West Hartford video website. They run a really good operation up there.
At the town of West Hartford?
West Hartford, Connecticut, yeah. I'll find they have I think it's WHTV or something like that. But they run I think what's recognized in the state is probably one of the better video operations for a government station. A lot of staff, a lot of budget, and a lot of programming too. So, yeah, I mean, unfortunately in Area 9, which is where we are, we're probably, not unfortunately, we're proudly number one in terms of the amount of meetings that we do, the amount of promotion that we do, the whole idea of doing this newsletter as well too. There's no other station in Southwest Connecticut, government station in Southwest Connecticut, that does as much as we do. But I know from reputation that there are others further upstate and in other states as well too. So curious to see what they're doing with all their content.
Yeah, we'll keep looking for best practices. Any other thoughts? What about playing with AI? What have you discovered?
A lot. Merging it with TV79 and TV79's needs, I think, is maybe an area of growth for me. Jim, we weren't able to connect, unfortunately. I know you said, here, take a look at this stuff, and I did, but I work better, I think, when I know what the tasks, needed. I think there's two areas to kind of look at, which is back end and front facing, right? So, what are we doing on the back end with large language models to kind of streamline our processes, right? To, as something as easy as having someone say, I'm having trouble with these file formats, just using, help me. Yeah. But also, I think generating those newsletters, making sure they're generated accurately, making sure that we can streamline our workflow so that we can generate them quicker, and maybe with best practices so that we know, this is how we do it, I think, is an area that I'm interested in discussing a little bit. So there's that, and I can pivot into that if you'd like. And then front facing is like, what are we using? What are we producing for the public with AI? What is the ramifications of that? How do we want it to look in terms of this is AI generated, read at your own risk, something in that respect. So I think those are the two areas that I'm kind of looking at. I have some questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
So with generating the newsletter summaries, we're using ChatGPT. How are we feeding the information into ChatGPT?
Four steps. One is you give the instructions, the prompts.
Okay. Yep.
Then you cut and paste the URL.
Interesting.
And then cut the URL of that video. And then cut and paste the transcript. And then say, I want the version for the description of 5,000 words or less. Then give me an executive summary of bullets.
So we've got a video posted to Vimeo or YouTube. And then we go to ChatGPT. We say, I would like you to do this. We give it a nice, robust request. And then in that same request, we post a hyperlink or
post the link of the full video.
Okay.
And it finds the clip. It makes the timestamps within the video.
Okay. Have we gone so far as to write like newsletter summaries and say, please give me a 500 word?
Yeah, it'll give you whatever you ask.
Okay. So and then it spits out something. And then, Carrie, you were talking about sort of a quality control.
Mhm.
I watched the meeting, I looked at it, looks good.
Yeah.
Publish it out, right?
Yeah.
Are we using ChatGPT 4 or 3.5?
For
4. Did we buy a subscription?
we used Area 9 money,
Okay.
$200.
We have a monthly subscription.
$200 a year.
Perfect. So we don't have to do anything about using Whisper to pull like voice to text and get transcripts. It will just watch the video.
YouTube does the transcript. YouTube
Okay.
makes the transcript. Now, sometimes on a long meeting, I'll have to wait after Jim posts it. I may have to wait 30 minutes before YouTube will create the closed captioning and the transcript.
Got
Because
it.
it takes time for YouTube to process. YouTube lays out. Vimeo does it, but there are a lot more steps to go through. YouTube makes it pretty simple. You just have to wait. Yeah, if it's a long meeting, it may take a half hour for them to generate the transcript.
I'm assuming we have a ChatGPT account straight for TV79.
Yep.
Okay. Have we gone into the settings and given it there's an opportunity to put about 10,000 words worth of permanent text, so you don't have to do certain things. Like, for instance, you can give it rules about, I don't ever want you to hallucinate. Or I would like you to, and this would be an interesting one, I would like you to ascribe to the journalistic ethics of XYZ. Because that would be nice, because it'll then do that, right? And I'm sure this is where I'm gonna maybe pivot to you guys' expertise in the media space. But in teachings, we have canons of ethics, and government, there's Robert's Rules of Order. Is there some sort of cited journalistic standards of ethics that we could say, please adhere to these when producing, these summaries and transcripts?
No, but that's a good, I didn't know that they did write it used to be at the top of the newsletter, and we moved it to the bottom about what the purpose of the newsletter is to make sure that democracy can flourish in a environment. ChatGPT wrote that.
So if you, I don't know whether it's Jim or Mike or Carrie who's taking the lead on actually doing it, but if you go to ChatGPT and you go to customize ChatGPT, so you click on your profile and then you click on customize ChatGPT, there's an introduce yourself section that is, what should it call you? What do you do? What traits would you like it to have? I'm just reading this straight off ChatGPT, by the way. What else should it know? So you should still be giving it a prompt, but this will be almost, it knows you like blue. So you won't have to tell it you like blue every single time. It knows that you ascribe to these canons of ethics. It knows that you're a local access media station, right? So that you can sort of layer that in with your prompt.
That's a good idea.
Which would be very helpful.
I'm a man, I don't read directions.
Yeah.
So thank you for, thank you. I never even knew that existed.
Yep. So
Yeah,
then let
maybe
me tell you about another thing that exists that is a little bit more scary. Not scary. It looks scary when you first see it. If you go to settings and then you go to personalization, there's a section called memory. And the way it works, and you might have seen this when you're typing things in, it'll give you a little memory updated. Well, that's saving it to a permanent long-term memory. And that's choosing for itself that it's a long-term memory. Now it has your best interests in heart. It's attempting to, say, oh, I know he likes blue from now on. I know that she wants the responses to be of this format, right? These sorts of things that hopefully, will help it. But you're not in control of that. It's choosing those memories. And if you have been, and I'll use personal experience, if you've been planning a vacation to Bermuda on your school account, it might slip in, while you're doing a lesson on Napoleon and you're generating stuff, hey,
Napoleon never went to Bermuda.
Saint Helena was a lot like, so you can trim those. So they will sort of organically populate. You can go in them and you can delete them or revise them as you see fit. Because obviously you don't want some long-term memory to slip in there that you don't want to be a long-term memory, that you think is superfluous or unnecessary. So I think those are two areas where, Mike, if you're taking the lead on this, I would go into settings and personalization and check out the memories. And I would go into the customized ChatGPT and I would build a TV79 profile. So those are two things. The third one is, have you used the projects tab?
Yes.
Okay.
I keep, there you go, there's a Darien TV79 project tab.
Yep. And I'm still working on sort of wrapping my head around the importance of the projects tab. I do find that it simply helps me with my workflow, like, moving into a project versus like just sort of throwing whatever question I have in sort of a stream of consciousness. But that's an area I need to do a little bit more research. So there's a couple of found items. Have you interrogated it about the strengths and weaknesses of your method?
No.
So that's a great. Here was my purpose. Here's why I'm doing it. Here's how I've been asking you to do it. Now you tell me, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the workflow that I'm currently doing? What would you advise?
It's been giving me that back a lot in the last couple of weeks, as my instructions have gotten more specific. It's regurgitated my instructions in simpler form.
Yep.
Or it says, gee, would you like me to do a PDF document for this? Do you want me to change the tone for a different audience? So it's prompting me by asking those kind of questions more now.
And if there's something you'd like to permanently do, tell it back that. Say,
Yeah.
yes, in fact, generate a PDF every time. Or what I found is whatever you put into it is what you get out of it. So what you want to do is preemptively force it to ask you to be the best version of yourself. In my feedback, it says, if you notice any biases in what I'm doing, I want you to, sort of highlight and ask me about them. Tell me what I'm not thinking about. I'm trying to think of some of the sort of core, but when you set up that idea, you can kind of write the noblest, most humane version of yourself and tell it to try to be that. Avoid my blind spots. Ask me follow-up questions that would aid you in this endeavor. Those sorts of things. So that I would philosophically you can kind of do that, and there's a couple ways to do it. On the front-facing stuff, I think it's going to be a few years until there's a real cohesive best practices on what's front facing. Everything's sort of flying by the face of its, seat of its pants. It says that over time there will probably be things like AI ethical licenses, so we won't have to worry about some of these things. When we use this model, we know that it's adhering to this thing. But I almost think of like the internet versus what do they call it, Web 2.0, when everything started to get app driven and more specialized and stuff like that. We're still in internet. We're not I don't think that there are any generative large language models that are specialized and cohesive to what we need to do yet. So
I see the things where I get 50 different ChatGPT applications to see if there's anything, and I haven't found anything that's more specific than ChatGPT.
No, and they're all running off the same models too. So, if you're using a school AI, it's actually using ChatGPT underneath it, or if you're, you're kind of drinking from the same well anyways. I assume we're not using DeepSeek, and I would continue to not use DeepSeek. I had a very fun endeavor where a couple of us history teachers asked it questions and watched it live censor those questions, which was fascinating. But yeah, so I don't want to take up too much airspace.
No, these are these are good things to work on.
Yeah. Setting up and saving those prompts too, that might be a good thing to create an AI Bible, a handbook. So if someone's going to take over this job, right? We're doing this now with helping students who are MLL, multi-language learners. And so, I have a student who does not speak almost any English. I'm learning how to use AI to generate stuff for them. But the real promise is creating a list of instructions so that the next teacher who has that student next year doesn't have to learn expensively all the things that I had to learn expensively. So I think it might be good to create a Google document or a folder or a manual that simply says, these are the practices we do for generating this. We have the right to edit it each year and update it, but and that also, I think, provides some transparency. When somebody says, how do you do this? You could say, here's the manual, we've reviewed it in committee. It's not perfect, but it's transparent and it's clear how we're doing it.
Fortunately, we're not quote reporting, where we're using people's own words, which simplifies it a little bit in terms of editorially taking a position. We've labored on making sure that the headlines are accurate and don't have and not using sarcasm. Like no cars were stolen last month.
I've seen, my bigger concern is hallucination. I mean, unless you ask it to create a story with a narrative, it won't do it, to your point, right? It'll summarize. But it will summarize correctly, and it'll do it with educated guesses. And so that's where, like, reviewing, right? Have you come across any hallucinations and what it's sort of spit out?
Jim had one on the bike committee of increasing by 50-fold what the money.
Yeah, I think that was a transcription or a bad audio error that it didn't hear correctly what was in there.
Occasionally, maybe numbers, I check those.
And it is, I mean, if you think about it, you're pouring the video into text, so you're going to lose a little there, and then you're pouring the text into the LLM. So it's like a copy of a copy, and so those things should naturally happen. It's just like, one thing we can think about too is, how do we train it to be even more on guard for those things, right? So when we design that prompt, and I think the best way is, as we come across those mistakes, to basically say, okay, we need to update our prompt and say, please double check all numbers used, and feed that into the prompt, or, it sounds like it's not fading down the stretch anymore, so we don't have to worry about that, but.
Yeah, that was it. There, I learned that you could.
Can the text say that it's not distinguishable in the number, or quote unquote sick,
We could train it to say, please only report what you have very clear audio for, or, well, if it's pulling a transcript, that wouldn't work. But
Last night was interesting at the RTM meeting. I heard in the meeting about the mill rate it's going to be 15.5, but there was a 15. I thought I heard 88, and I looked at the transcript today and it said 48. And I went back and listened to the audio, and I could hear the 4 and I can hear the 8. The guy doing the minutes independently heard 48. So, I assumed that was right out there. What the guy who said it, did he say 48, or did he mean 48, or did he mean 88? So I'm assuming 40, but that was what you mean. It was recorded off this room, and it's easy to mix numbers and things like that.
Yeah, and my skepticism is perhaps more than healthy. So I'd rather be very, very skeptical and then say, the truth is, we're really sort of counting how many angels are on the head of a pin. For the most part, it does excellent work. So I think maybe I'm getting a little too deep in the weeds here and it's probably working quite fine. I think the back end stuff though, about feeding that and building a
Yeah. Well,
TV79 model.
Yeah,
We didn't even know about that.
yeah, that's good to know.
Are you, are teachers using it more as a teaching tool or a learning tool?
I ran the PD for our department, because unfortunately.
PD.
Professional development,
Yeah.
so, I'm sure, we're local government, we, we don't bring in the big speakers who, train us, unfortunately, it's a lot of teachers teaching teachers. I think a couple of things, one, we're looking at, like, the most obvious, and it's so reflective of how the internet was. Step one, countermeasures for cheating. Step two is, okay, this is an interesting tool, how do we use it front facing for students? And then step three, and I think this is the part where everyone really should get on board for this. And I'm sure, Mike, I think you described it quite well. It's like, all the things I can now do with it, I can ask it any question. So, my workflow is, and this is where ethics are really interesting because I don't want it grading. I have a nice firewall between me grading things and ChatGPT, commenting on them. But I do want it helping me with my emails. I do want it helping me design quick summaries that I can then read and print out for my students and stuff like that. So a lot of generative work, a lot of production of things like what we're producing, right? I need a 5-page reading. I don't like the textbook reading. I think it's not well tailored to our students. I could do better if you gave me 20 minutes with AI and that sort of stuff. And then modeling. So a lot of training kids. And I think what I said to you about you need to be the most noble version of yourself to get the best out of it. Well, you're not a 14-year-old. A 14-year-old really needs to know that. And so there's a fair amount of work that I've been doing with students about sort of saying like, look, if you say, what is Martin Luther? You're not going to get a great response. But if you say, I'm a 9th grader, I'm sure that, I'd like to talk to Martin Luther for 20 minutes so he can teach me about, his life so I can really understand it. Wow, you're going to learn a lot about Martin Luther. So there's a lot. I mean, it's like the internet. There's so much for you, for them, for everyone. It's changing a lot of things. At the same time, and I'm talking too long, I apologize. Maybe you do all that on Monday, and then on Tuesday, you unplug everything and you have them read a book and you make sure that they have that skill too. So it's not, I've been around long enough to see people try to say this technology is the way of the future, you'll be using it every 5 minutes. And iPads in classrooms were a terrible decision. So I think we're a little bit more on this day, we use this tool because it is important. On this day, you open a book and you read, because the long form reading is important. And I think that's a good maybe model for us too, is where are we sure we're going to use AI and where are we going to ensure that we're not, that we still think that it's our job to do this, not generative AI.
I like the idea of, not for us, but just somebody I want to talk to, or what if somebody think about it, say, I'd like to have a conversation with this person, and they structure it as a conversation rather than
I love the idea of
give me a summary
having
of,
your age.
give me a summary of what Jim Cameron thinks. It's, take everything that Jim Cameron said publicly, and he and I can have a conversation on ChatGPT.
No, you have to,
Can I just get back to what our main mission is? Okay, town meetings and that kind of thing. Is it each meeting recorded by a stenographer?
No.
Nope.
Only
Nope.
one-
So
only
is
planning and zoning.
the only record is channel 79. Okay.
The only full audio or video recording is by TV79. I don't even think that P&Z does or RTM have stenographers anymore.
So P&Z does, because they were asking her, she was
Don't they have
asking
all
people
kinds
to
of
correct
legal
their spelling on their
systems?
name last week.
When people sue the city for,
They legally have to have a stenographer for those kind of lawsuits. And the TV79 doesn't qualify. I don't know if they've looked at it recently, but the last time I asked, it didn't qualify in case there was litigation about what was said, they wanted the requirement of the stenographer.
So that's the main, sorry, it's striking me is that's what just whatever else we do, we have to maintain this record. Now, there was some discussion about not keeping all these tapes.
No, we have everything and
That is now-
from day one is in the library, till Jim went digital and everything's in digital and backed up.
It's all back to, it's all back to.
I mean, that's what I always, that's why I've always said, my job as program director is more of librarian and archivist. I have to remember that in addition to what are we going to put on the air tonight? It's because we are doing that important archival role for people. I don't think P&Z even does. They don't have a stenographer anymore. I think they rely on us.
They did it their
So
last
have
meeting.
we ever been subpoenaed for our transcripts?
No. We haven't been subpoenaed for anything.
Okay.
I mean, it's there. It's out in public. If anybody wants to download those videos, they're all
Well,
there.
I
They're
thought
all
there was an
accessible.
incident maybe 10 years ago, so we're outside the statute of limitations. But when the committee took a break, but the chair didn't pause the meeting, so the recording continued and conversations were picked up on the microphone because the meeting technically was still in session. And the chair had not gone into recess for a bio break. They just took the recess, but didn't stop the meeting. So we kept the recording going and picked up some conversations at the table that I thought somebody, maybe it was in Norwalk, where there was litigation over conversations, side conversations, while technically the meeting was still in progress.
Yeah.
But
No, I
even
know
though
it's
people-
I'm still stunned that there isn't a stenographer at these
The
meetings.
expense is enormous.
Yeah.
Legally, they have to pay for a stenographer. I mean, that's, I think,
So
as I
the board-
recall asking that
The
question.
Board of Selectmen don't have a stenographer?
No. I think it's mostly land use things
Yeah.
that
Because that's where
require
the
used to
litigation-
require
that's
because
where the
that's where
litigation-
you're going to end up in court if you get appealed.
That's where the litigation is.
No one's asked for a transcript of our, any of our meetings either as well. Now, I know that some of those land use boards rely on us, and if we're not going to be there, I got a phone call. Are you going to be able to cover it? They always check as well too, because they want to make sure they have a record for their own purposes as well too, to be able to go back.
I agree with, I thought that they had stopped the stenographer as well until the last P&Z meeting where they did have a stenographer because she was asking people how to spell their names. And I hadn't noticed that in a while. I thought they had done away with it. But there was a stenographer there at the last meeting. I'll ask Steve.
Shall we move along?
Yep, anything else? Technology, Jim, you want to give a quick update on the upgrade since the last meeting for room 119 and 206, which I think is all done?
I'll let you talk about 119 because you're the master of the Zoom that we're using this evening in 119. The good news is in 206, we're getting a grant from Area 9 of about $7,200, 3,000 of which is going to be put in toward paying camera operators. But that still leaves us enough money for Jeff Adams, who is the IT guy for the whole town, to buy one of these view boards. What you're looking at right now in room 119, we're going to be able to put into room 206 as well too. And Mike, you more familiar and conversant with what the view board is able to do. Maybe you could explain what that benefit's going to be.
It's essentially a Zoom room, but for the RTM, it allowed us to do hybrid meetings if a committee had members away. Now, we've had to spend a lot of time because we've been Zoom bombed 3 times in the last month to protecting against being Zoom bombed and how do we make the public aware of the link, but make them ask us for it before we give it to them. So with an email so that we know, we don't put it on the town website where someone can just scrape it into it's if you want to attend the meeting. If there's no public comment, the view is, it's going to be on TV79 the next day and you can watch it on TV79 the next day. If it's a meeting that has public comment, we have to provide people a way to make a public comment. but how do we guard? We screen people coming in, not that we are not going to let them in if they're a legitimate citizen, but if they're attempting to Zoom bomb.
Excuse my morbid curiosity, but who's Zoom bombing us?
Just bots, you know, when it comes up with pornography and
Are they trying to sell us like Bitcoins or?
No,
it's mostly, you know, like there were
perverted stuff.
like eight people came in and Zoom bombed with 8 different porn sites in videos in each of the 8 gallery photos. And so we end the meeting and then start it up again, and we have a waiting room, and you're just more careful the next time in the waiting room. The hard part is people won't put their name on it, even, you know, members. It comes in as Joe's iPad, and so you don't know who they are. You know, we had somebody try to get into the RTM meeting last night that we didn't recognize the name, and then they changed their name and then they dropped off, and nobody recognized. And this was the rules committee, so in theory, it's the same people who are active at every meeting, and none of us recognize this person's name. So we don't know if that was an attempted Zoom bomb that when we asked them to identify themselves, that stopped it, or it was just, I can't imagine somebody, you don't come across a link by accident. It's too complicated.
Mike, have you got an official answer from town council about what we have to notice for public meetings in
No,
terms of virtual?
He's turned it over to FOIA to ask them to tell us
Huh, okay.
of how do we guard against Zoom bombs, particularly if the meeting is being recorded. You know, like the GIAC meeting, we covered it live because it was in 206, and they were saying, if you want to make public comment, you can come in on Zoom, but if you just want to watch the meeting, go to YouTube or TV79 or cable and watch it. It's a lot easier than being a tile on a Zoom screen. And that was a much better way to listen to it. So you know, and then in 119, I mean, in the auditorium, we practiced last night if we thought we were going to need the table in there for a meeting because they run out of conference rooms, and so we practiced with the cameras. And so that's an additional conference room that we could use the tables at the auditorium with the auditorium upgrade, which has worked extremely well. And they're not going the audio and to thank to Jeff Adams and his team, when they installed the ViewSonic board, they also put in more microphones, which is the audio on the Zooms are very good. It was a concern that the audio wasn't really good when the only mic that we put in a cheap $77 webcam up there, and the only mic was up there. The Board of Education came in put in that unit and then put more microphones in the ceiling so that the audio quality, you watch this meeting tomorrow, the audio quality is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the microphones are up there.
I mean, what we're getting out of 119 now, I have told our camera operators who have been in there shooting meetings as well too. I said, you see that stuff on top of that whiteboard up there? It can do your job. So you really got to impress me, manual camera operator, with what it is you're able to do that this thing up there ain't able to do. I'm perfectly happy. If it's a high stakes meeting, sure, I'm happy to staff it wherever it is it's going to be, inside town hall or out. But if it's just another RTM meeting of a committee kind of going through the paces, what I'm seeing tonight on the receiving end of this Zoom is adequate for my purposes, and I think for most people watching at home. Doesn't have to look like a 3-camera shoot. It's one camera and it's fine. And it's going to save us some money to be able to do some of the other special projects that we want to do over and above regular meeting coverage.
It's just the aspect of the when there's a presentation where if we were going to use this room and not have a TV79 videographer, we'd have to move the podium to here because that camera's not geared up to shoot somebody from the side. So people would have to change how they presented. And you know, we're experimenting with the camera following the speaker, and the videographers do a significantly better job, but it's good enough for a meeting like this where we're just talking to each other. You know, you need it, but for the bigger meetings, they do a terrific job, and it really makes a difference in changing the camera shots. The technology, I don't know how long it was that the guy from the founder of Meeting Owl drove down from Boston to show us his prototype. It's got to be 10 years ago. And then they're still struggling with trying to follow the speaker. You know, there are a number of hardware vendors that do it, but it's still, it hasn't progressed as quickly as artificial intelligence. Any new business?
Budget. I just wanted to update on budget. I mentioned the grant that we're going to be receiving. Our spend rate, our burn rate, as it were, seems to be holding strong. I don't think we're going to have any trouble getting through the rest of the fiscal year. We do have, money from Area 9 for camera operators. One expense that we had not expected, somehow Mailchimp got wind of the fact that we were using a free account for the past, 10 years. So now we got to pony up $45 a month for Mailchimp for the program guide and the best of. But we'll find a way of covering that cost as well too. But otherwise, we're doing fine in terms of dough. And I think I asked in the current budget that's up for consideration, I asked for a small increase both on the software and support side, working with Cecil to try and anticipate what he's going to want to work on. And on the videographer side as well too, just to deal with inflation and the new higher rate that we're paying them on an hourly basis. Mike, you might want to, under new business, talk about the consultant we were talking with and the Darien Foundation and what's.
Yeah, let's wait till we'll know more because everything's put on hold till the fall.
Okay.
So, and we're gonna see how much we're gonna learn on our own.
Okay.
Back when we asked the question, we didn't know anything. Now I know a little bit more and can see, gee, I know where he's getting that solution from. I know, and I learned a ton tonight.
You got a consultant right there on the table sitting next to you. Our AI expert.
Tonight,
What's his fee versus mine?
So the next meeting is July 22nd. It'll probably be on Zoom because at least half of us are
I won't be there.
in various places. You're in Bermuda, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know ChatGPT.
And I hope very much not to be on Zoom as well.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope, well, but it would probably be July 22nd and we'll see if we have any new information. Anybody else have anything that they'd like to add? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, second. Jim, it's up to you to stop the recording.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
I did.
Be good, Jim.